So yeah, you got a busy year ahead of you here.
Yes, I'm releasing 4 new CDs.
Okay, well, let's get into it. Before we do, first and foremost, thank you for taking a minute out for the program. I appreciate it.
Sure, my pleasure.
So let's get into something that really kind of rocked all of us 4.5 years ago or so, which was getting through this pandemic. And especially for musicians, there was so many things that were kind of rearranged and shifted around. How much of living through that time period has either influenced these upcoming releases or the way that you do things now?
Uh, well, a small influence is that given the more limited activity, it further kind of slowed the process of me getting back into the recording studio to record a lot of material that I had been playing and composing and, been a part of my repertoire now for a number of years. Of course, recording is something that was a little more doable in the pandemic, maybe not in the height of isolation, but uh, now things feel pretty back to normal.
Yeah.
So I think we're mostly past it. In fact, I wrote a piece about the pandemic that will be an upcoming recording project, not one of these four. And I have to say, I'm a little surprised that I don't see that many artistic works of any kind dealing with the pandemic. It's almost like people just want to forget about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in any case, it had been some time, as I think you might be aware, that I've recorded my own trio music and been in the studio now getting ready to release it, and the pandemic probably slowed that process a bit. So that's the best way I can answer that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I get that feeling that a lot of people are just done talking about it and getting over. And I didn't, I really wanted to put this question to rest, but I feel like it was such a shapeshifter in so many ways, especially for the jazz community. There was so much, virtual stuff that was going on. There was so many things that were just kind of getting built up, that was getting written and composed, that eventually was going to come out. There was other people that had releases, and then the world shut down. I mean, there was just the architecture of it was so weird. It was kind of like the virus itself. It was a metaphor, just
Well,
so
I think another dimension to it is it just further hastened the process of the where we are in our digital world.
yeah.
Like a guy like you is out there promoting jazz and talking to jazz artists in a way that pre some of these digital things and pre-pandemic and pre-Zoom just weren't really par for the course, and now they are.
And that's probably one of the greatest things about this is that I finally get to see all the musicians that I merely did over the phone. It was all audio. And now I get to kind of see, where people are and instruments and pictures and just in living color. I think that's kind of a cool offshoot. Um,
Yeah, well, you should see the album cover because I even look better.
So let me ask you this real quick. So how did this come about? The trios and four acts. How are you going to release it? How did the idea hatch? Kind of give me the nexus of this.
Well, like I say, I've had a lot of material that I'm playing all the time on tour, in clubs, and concerts in the U.S., around the world, that just wasn't recorded. And the material uh, loosely falls into four programs, more than loosely, actually. Uh, and I always think programmatically. This is something that I think adds to the success of a jazz concert or a jazz club performance, which in a way is often like a concert, is to really have a good program, an engaging program, and a good theme, if possible. And I think about this all the time, and I discuss it with my students as well. Anyway, so the first one is called High Standards, and because I've dealt with the Great American Songbook and jazz and Great American Songbook standards my whole career, and I've had always sort of an arranger's mischievous touch to how I like to present them in a personal and somewhat unique way. So that was a natural collection, and that's going to be the first release in March on the 21st, will be High Standards. I'm also a very active composer. and I've written things both that are just sort of in the jazz tune, jazz trio vein, but I've also written a jazz opera, full-length dramatic work. I've written music for Alvin Ailey Dance. So I've worked in sort of both mindsets of the jazz player writing a tune for his group and for the composer that's looking at perhaps a longer form, which brings into mind many other issues of composition. So the second album will be called the Ted Rosenthal Songbook, and that will feature about 10 of my original compositions, including 4 from my jazz opera, Dear Eric. The third release is another strand that has been a part of my career now for quite some time, which is with my background in classical music and my ongoing interest and seeing the value in bridging gaps and worlds a little bit. I released an album in 2010 called Impromptu, which was a collection of classical themes, I say reimagined into the world of jazz. Basically, I'm playing them as jazz trio tunes.
Yeah.
And one of the nicest reviews I ever got, which I still mention, was a reviewer said, "Oh, I walked away from the CD and I thought to myself, oh, I don't know that Cole Porter song. What is it?" And I came back and it was a Chopin nocturne.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's kind of the goal,
Yeah.
just make it sound very organic, very natural, but the theme itself is not Cole Porter, it's Chopin or other classical composers.
Yeah.
And that will be released in October, I think. We're spacing them out about every 3 or 4 months. And then the
Okay.
final release will be about 3 or 4 months later, probably in January. And that reflects my interest in the whole history of jazz piano. I teach a course at Manhattan School of Music called Jazz Piano Styles, where I go chronologically through the history of jazz piano. And the truth is, I love it all. I don't like to be pigeonholed. And that's become much more a part, I think, of our world in jazz these days, where people don't just play one group of repertoire. They might go back and play a James P. Johnson stride piece, or then the next thing you know, they're playing a Chick Corea piece.
Yeah.
Uh, so the last one is a collection actually of my originals that I've written in an earlier style, and some standards, including the Maple Leaf Rag, which I play as a duet with drummer Tim Horner. And I wrote my own original rag called the Schmata Rag. So that'll be the fourth release. So you could say that all 4 of these themes run through my musical life, and that's the overview of the project for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this. When you go into each of these projects, you have this vision and you do it for varying reasons. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what are you hoping the listener gets from these releases?
Uh, well, first of all, enjoyment.
Yeah.
I look for ways of connecting with the listener, and hopefully they hear things that they didn't hear before in some new ways, but in a warm and welcoming way, not in a beating you over the head kind of way.
Yeah.
Uh, One of the things, and I think I said something like this in the liner notes, which I wrote for High Standards. The combination, I think, in jazz in particular, of the familiar along with surprises, along with the unexpected, I think is really a winning combination.
Yeah.
And so you have something that you say, oh yeah, I know that melody, or that's familiar, but all of a sudden it takes on a new shape or a new frame, and it grabs your attention. So those are the kinds of things I hope the listener will notice and appreciate.
So let's go back to the beginnings of your life here. Talk to me a little bit about how you got into piano, how jazz became kind of your destiny. How did all of this evolve into who you are?
Yeah, well, I was very interested in music from a very young age. You could almost say I was obsessed. And my parents didn't try to make me become a doctor or a lawyer, and were supportive of my passion about music. And I had a teacher very young, like very typical at age 6. You begin piano lessons. She was extremely strict, And I was clearly musical, but I didn't really have the patience or the discipline to sit there and read the notes and do my assignments. And so she got frustrated and I got frustrated and I quit. And then I kept my interest in music by playing some rock guitar, and I took up trumpet in the school band. And then when I was 12 years old, I was doing these musical activities, but the phone rang back before cell phones, before answering machines. And I ran to pick it up, and I said to my mother, "Mom, there's some guy offering a free piano lesson." Like, it was weird, like someone was calling up saying, "We're offering a free piano lesson." And my mother decided that she really thought I should get back to the piano. She said, "I want you to go, and I'll go with you, and we'll do it together." And I said, "Okay." Well, the guy who was offering a free piano lesson turned out to be a guy named Tony Aless, who is not that well known, but in fact, he recorded some of the Charlie Parker with strings. He's on some Stan Getz recordings, and played with Woody Herman a little bit. But back in the 70s, when times were kind of lean for jazz, he was doing more teaching and
Yeah.
offering free trial lessons. So we came in and he sat down and gave me a little demonstration. I think he played Tenderly, or he played some standard. And I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. I think I like that. So the next thing you know, I'm learning Tenderly. I'm learning a little Bach too. I'm learning Yardbird Suite, and that's how it all got started. And then I studied with other well-known jazz pianists briefly, 6 or 9 months at a time. I actually got to study with Lenny Tristano briefly when I was around 16. I also studied with Jackie Byard, and I have to say, when I mentioned to you the fourth project, dealing with sort of a more historical look back at some jazz piano styles, Jackie Byard was, emblematic of playing with Eric Dolphy, but then the next thing you know, he's playing a ragtime or Fats Waller piece. So even though I was very young, I think there was something that seeped into my consciousness at that point about
Yeah.
my time with Jackie Byard.
So are you originally from New York?
Yeah, I grew up in Great Neck, Long Island,
Okay.
and I've spent most of my life in the New York City area.
Okay. Well, New York's obviously the place that most musicians want to land. I mean, that's the mecca of jazz. So my question to you is, when you really got your tentacles into the New York scene, what was the one stage that you always wanted to play on and you finally did and you were like, wow, it's happening?
Yeah, well, I guess there are a few, anything from the first time I got to play at the Village Vanguard.
Yeah.
Even before that, there was this place called the Top of the Gate at the Village Gate, and I did some piano gigs there that felt pretty special to
Yeah.
be part of that scene. And the first time I played at Carnegie Hall, that was extremely
Yeah.
impactful as well.
So speaking of being on these hallowed stages and just even the teachers that you had and the experiences that you've had with musicians, as a teacher, what do you want to impart on your students? What is one of the main things that you want them to understand, not only about this music, but the jazz community?
Uh, well, there's a lot of things I want them to understand. Um, I think you really need a combination of the talent and the drive, and the work ethic, and to be able to take all the creativity and sparks that are flying, but to kind of craft it into figuring out how to accomplish what you want to accomplish. I think that's something I've been able to help my students with, figuring out how to work on things, what to listen for, it's almost like problem solving at times. So, you got the inspiration, then you have the perspiration.
Yeah.
uh, and as far as community, my comment would be that, I'm extremely lucky. Tonight we're doing actually a concert with the Juilliard jazz piano students. And these young men and women are just off the charts,
Yeah.
talented, musical. I mean, this is really, truly, when you read about who's who in jazz in 3 or 4 or 5 years, these are the people. Um, and so I feel very lucky to be exposed, and hopefully they feel lucky to have my input uh, as as well. So it's really the community aspect. I try to let them know, because you could imagine when you're 19, 20, 21, and sometimes they'll come in for a lesson. They'll say, I don't have a record contract yet. And I'll look at them and I say, Monk got his first record contract at 30. So you got to be a little bit patient,
Yeah.
and not everything happens overnight.
Yeah.
One of your peers may have had something. Uh, but so I guess the point of that is that the community is long lasting. It's, the jazz career is kind of like a slow burn.
Yeah.
Very few are like become pop stars and
Right.
way up. A few do, of course, but and so it's great. It's almost become a running joke now when we see players, especially pianists, and I'll comment to whoever, my wife or someone I'm with, and say, "Oh yeah, he was my student," or "She was my." It's almost like just silly, because it's like I almost may as well not say it anymore, because it's like almost everybody at one point
Yeah.
studied with me privately, or was in one of my ensembles, or took a class with me, or something.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. I want to kind of backtrack to live music. What was the first live show, jazz show that you saw that was seminal, that really kind of ignited a passion in you, or just had an effect?
Hmm. Well, I got to see some things early on. It's definitely not the first one, but I remember going to the Village Vanguard and hearing Dexter Gordon when he came back from New York. And it was, I think, what ended up becoming the Homecoming album in
Yeah.
about 1976. And there was something pretty magical about the music and the feeling and the whole thing. It wasn't the first one for sure, but it just popped into my head.
Yeah. The last thing I did before the pandemic came to a close, I went on March 13th to a reading that Maxine Gordon did about Dexter. And I remember she signed the book. And when I left, I just looked down at the date and I was like, March 13th, 2020. I wonder how that's going to resound in my life. And little did I know, that was the day the curtain came down. And I ended up talking to her about that about 8 months later, and told her how important that autograph was. And she was like, from there on, she is always going to put the date on anything that she signs. So it's interesting, but that's a phenomenal book on Dexter. And I remember that part of his life very well. So let me ask you this. You've been at this for decades. You clearly love this art form. What gets you up every day? What motivates you to continue to be a creative force in this music, both as a creator and an educator?
I think we're always just trying to play better, and just get a little deeper and find a little more interest. And that's one of the things when I say I feel lucky about working with these talented young people, because they are so in that zone that it's very contagious, and it kind of keeps us all having that artistic fire uh, continue continue to burn. I have to say, having gigs, projects, things to do, I think makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
It sometimes can be hard to do things in the abstract, so to speak, where you say, "Oh, I want to get better. I want to work on this." But if you've got, a recording date, or you have a concert coming up, or something specific, a specific goal, uh, certainly gets the juices flowing.
So what are you doing to promote this quartet of albums coming out? What are you doing for shows? How are you kind of orchestrating all of this as the year kind of unfolds?
Uh, Well, I have a series of shows that are kind of already on my calendar that relate to the various themes, but I'm, of course, looking for more to add. Uh, and I'm hoping that the four CD concept will get people's attention, and working with publicists and others to make that happen. And because I haven't released anything of my own trio in some time, I think people also seem to be interested. You know,
Yep.
absence makes the heart grow fonder, perhaps.
Sure.
So I've got trips. Going to be playing in Europe twice, in Israel. Just something just came through, and I mentioned to the promoter. He said, "Well, we like to have themes," and I said, "Well, you know, I'm about to release an album called High Standards." And the next thing I see on their internet promotion, Ted Rosenthal, High Standards. You know, here's the concert. So. You know, it's not a perfectly orchestrated and planned series of events, but I'm hoping it will all relate and take shape nicely for what I've already got in my calendar and what I'm hoping to add to my calendar over the course of the year.
So, Ted, as the man behind this music, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, fans, students, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
That's an interesting question. Well, I think I probably come across as a musician with a certain kind of intelligence and maturity in my approach. Some people may think I'm more on the traditional side, although there's plenty of mischief in there when given the opportunity
Yeah.
as well. And thoughtful, maybe, would be a word that comes in. And I appreciate, and maybe it comes through, and people comment on sort of a certain amount of polish. You know, people mention my sound and my touch and things that they don't always maybe hear from every jazz artist in that way. I don't know. I've never been asked that question
You did
before.
great. No, that pretty much sums it up. So if anyone out there wants to pick up these albums, what's the best way for them to kind of be alerted, or the best way to get it to really benefit you the most? Is Bandcamp? How do you do that? What's the best way?
Well, all that is somewhat still in process, but I've just organized the first digital release. I mean the digital release, I should say, for High Standards, which will be March 21st. So it should hit all the streaming platforms on March 21st. Two of the pieces on High Standards, Jet Song from West Side Story, and an arrangement I've been playing, kind of an adventurous look at Old Devil Moon. Those are two singles that I'm releasing. Jet Song just came out on Friday, so you can already see and hear that on Spotify or whatever you use. And Old Devil Moon will come out, I think, in a week from Friday. And then the albums will be available. Physical discs will be available on my website, www.tedrosenthal.com, and at my performances, of course. I
Yeah.
bring them that way, and this is the first time actually I'm doing it on my own. So
Cool.
that's another indication of post-pandemic digital world.
There you go.
And part of the reason I'm doing it on my own is I didn't get feedback from anyone that was that interested in releasing 4 CDs in a year. And I said, you know what? If you're not, I'm going to do it. And let's see
Yeah.
what happens.
Absolutely. Well, that's funny. Our interview came full circle. We started with COVID. We came back to COVID. So, Ted, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for opening up your world of music and your life in jazz. And best of luck with these releases.
My pleasure, Joe.